The child, a boy no older than 10, was accused of a crime he could not possibly have understood. The charge was treason, the punishment death. His trial, if it could even be called that, lasted precisely 4 minutes and 13 seconds. A droning bureaucrat read the charges from a glowing hollow scroll, barely looking at the terrified boy who stood trembling before the imperial tribunal. The judge, a withered member of the Vortal species, adjusted his ceremonial sash, pressed his talon to the sentencing panel, and pronounced guilty. The child cried out, his voice swallowed by the sterile acoustics of the grand hall. A cluster of guards, reptilian enforcers clad in obsidian armor, moved with practiced indifference. They secured the child in a restraint field, a shimmering cube of energy that paralyzed his every movement, rendering him a prisoner in his own body. A moment later, the sentence was carried out, swift, clinical, devoid of ceremony. A pulse of energy surged through the cube, and the boy was gone. The Empire did not know his name. They did not care to know. But his mother did. General Helena Blackstone was a name that once commanded fear on the battlefield, a woman whose reputation stretched across entire sectors. She had fought in wars that reshaped the balance of power, had torn through enemy lines with the precision of a scalpel and the force of a hurricane. She had been a tactician, a leader, a soldier. And then she had been a mother. She had left it all behind for him, for peace, for a quiet life on a world where war was nothing more than an echo in history books. She had sworn never to return to the battlefield, to let the galaxy churn and rage without her. She had given them her service, her blood, her victories. In return, she had asked for only one thing, to live out the rest of her days in obscurity with her son. And the Empire had taken him from her. The news reached her in the dim interior of a decrepit bar on the fringes of known space. She sat at a corner table, a half-empty bottle of something strong and bitter in front of her. The hollow screen flickered to life, broadcasting a routine transmission, a list of executed traitors. Names scrolled past in impersonal monotony, a procession of the forgotten. And then she saw it, her son's name. For a long moment, she did not move. The sounds of the bar faded into a distant hum, the clinking of glasses and low murmurs dissolving into white noise. Her grip on the bottle tightened, her knuckles turning pale. Her breath came slow and measured, a terrifying stillness settling over her like a shroud. Then she exhaled, set the bottle down, and stood. The patrons of the bar barely noticed as she strode past them, her movements precise, deliberate. Only the bartender, a grizzled old veteran with one cybernetic eye, seemed to recognize the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. He watched her leave without a word, muttering only a single phrase under his breath. Poor bastards don't know what they've done. The first thing she did was retrieve her weapons. Helena had hidden them well, buried beneath layers of false identities and abandoned storage units scattered across multiple systems. The galaxy had tried to forget her, and she had let it. But now, as she retrieved the matte black plasma rifle from its stasis case, as she strapped the weight of old war into place, she felt something awaken within her, a hunger, cold and consuming. Her armor was battered but functional, a relic of a past she had sworn never to revisit. She donned it with the precision of an old ritual, each piece locking into place like the final components of an unstoppable machine. The weight was familiar, comforting. Then came the ship. The Valkyrie was a ghost from another time, a vessel that should have been decommissioned years ago. It had once been a warship, stripped of its official markings, left to rot in a forgotten hangar. It still bore the scars of past battles, the pitted hull a testament to the wars it had survived. Helena brought it roaring back to life in a matter of minutes. She had no army. She did not need one. Her destination was clear, the heart of the Empire, the seat of the royal family. The Emperor himself had ordered the execution. His signature nothing more than a flourish on a datapad, a careless decree issued from the comfort of his opulent throne. He had not known the name of the child he had condemned. Helena would make sure he never forgot it. The journey through imperial space was not a quiet one. The first obstacle she encountered was a patrol fleet, a cluster of sleek, silver ships bristling with weaponry. They detected the Valkyrie almost immediately, their scanners flaring to life as they moved to intercept. The fleet's commander, an arrogant officer named Warborn, opened a channel. His image flickered onto her view screen, his expression one of practiced boredom. Unidentified vessel. You are unrestricted. She did not let him finish. With a flick of her wrist, she cut the transmission and accelerated, her ship tearing through the void like a missile. The Imperial fleet scrambled to react, their weapon systems locking onto her position. But they were slow, predictable. She had fought these ships before, had outmaneuvered them in wars they barely remembered. She disabled the first cruiser in seconds, her pulse cannons punching through its shields as if they were paper. The second ship lasted marginally longer, its desperate counter-fire scattering harmlessly against her deflectors before she sent it spiraling into the darkness. The rest of the fleet hesitated. She did not. By the time the last of the patrol ships had been reduced to drifting wreckage, she was already past them, a shadow slipping through the cracks of Imperial security. The capital world loomed ahead, its skyline a glittering expanse of towers and spires. It was a place of decadence, of excess, a monument to the Empire's power. And soon it would burn. She landed without clearance, the Valkyrie cutting through traffic lanes like a blade through silk. The city erupted into chaos, alarms wailing as security forces scrambled to contain the sudden intrusion. Helena moved through them like a specter, her rifle spitting blue fire, her movements a calculated symphony of violence. She had one destination, the Imperial Palace. By the time she reached the grand doors, she had left a trail of bodies in her wake. The guards at the entrance raised their weapons, their faces a mixture of fear and disbelief. She did not slow. The first shot took down the nearest soldier. The second and third found their marks before the others could even react. The remaining guards hesitated, their training warring with the sudden, gut-wrenching realization that they were not dealing with an ordinary enemy. She did not give them time to decide. The palace doors buckled under the force of an explosive charge, the shock wave reverberating through the grand hall beyond. Inside, courtiers and officials scrambled for cover, their carefully maintained composure shattering as she stepped through the smoke. At the far end of the hall, seated upon a throne of polished obsidian, was the Emperor. For the first time in his life, he knew fear. Helena raised her rifle. "This is for my son." The first shot rang out, and the Empire would never be the same again. The palace was in chaos. Alarms blared through the corridors, high-pitched wails echoing off the grand marble walls as courtiers scrambled in every direction, desperate to escape the impending doom that now stalked the imperial halls. Helena moved with practiced precision, her boots pressing against the obsidian floors without hesitation, her pulse rifle leveled as she advanced toward the throne. The Emperor sat frozen upon his gilded seat, his eyes wide, disbelief washing over his regal features. He had heard the reports. Some rogue human had torn through his capital defenses, had overwhelmed his elite guard, had stormed the very seat of his power. But none of it had seemed real. Not until now. Helena took another step forward, the acrid scent of scorched ozone from her rifle mingling with the incense, still burning from some forgotten courtly ritual. Around them, noble officials, diplomats, and sycophants cowered in horror, their fine robes dragging across the polished floor as they attempted to scuttle away unnoticed. She raised her rifle, and the Emperor flinched. "I see you remember how to fear," she said. Her voice was steady, devoid of rage, devoid of mercy. "I was worried you might have forgotten." Guards still stood at his side, a handful of them, their ornate armor gleaming, but their hands trembling against their weapons. They were ceremonial figures, chosen for their ability to stand still and look impressive rather than for any real combat experience. She knew this before she even fired. The first shot struck a guard square in the chest, sending his lifeless body crashing into the Emperor's grand dais. The others hesitated, their fingers tightening around their triggers. That hesitation cost them their lives. Helena fired twice more, a blue streak of plasma slicing through the second guard's helmet before he even managed to raise his weapon. The third made the mistake of turning to run, which only made him easier to shoot. The Emperor gasped, his trembling fingers gripping the arms of his throne. "Why, you're making a mistake," Helena scoffed, lowering her rifle just enough to lean forward. "You executed a human child." The Emperor swallowed. "It was a clerical error," she interrupted. "A bureaucratic misstep? A footnote in your pathetic empire's ledgers." The Emperor's mouth opened and closed, his mind struggling to formulate the correct response. He was not a man used to fear, nor was he accustomed to dealing with people who did not bow and scrape at his feet. He had spent his reign believing in the Empire's invincibility, in the unwavering dominance of its laws, in the undeniable power of its military. That belief shattered under the weight of a single human standing before him. "I am the Emperor," he managed to stammer. I can fix this." Helena tilted her head slightly. "Fix this." "I can grant you land," he continued, scrambling for something, anything, to barter with. "Power. Wealth beyond your—" She shot him in the leg. The Emperor screamed, clutching at his now useless limb as blood pooled beneath his robes. The nobles who had been frozen in stunned silence finally found their courage, or at least their survival instincts, and fled en masse, their hurried footfalls echoing through the palace halls. Helena did not spare them a glance. "You don't understand," the Emperor gasped, his voice a pitiful whimper as he struggled against the pain. "The Empire." "The Empire is already dead," she interrupted. "It just doesn't know it yet." The Emperor's lips trembled as he stared up at her. She could see the realization creeping into his eyes, the slow, dawning horror of a man who had spent his life believing he was untouchable, only to be proven wrong in the most brutal way possible. Then the doors behind her burst open, the sound of heavy boots, of reinforcements rushing into the chamber. Dozens of them, their weapons raised, their armor far more functional than the decorative nonsense the palace guards had worn. They surrounded her in an instant, a semicircle of blaster rifles and charging plasma lances. Helena smiled. She dropped her rifle. A murmur rippled through the assembled soldiers. Confusion, hesitation. They had not expected her to surrender. Neither had the Emperor. The wounded ruler, still clutching his bleeding leg, managed to push himself up slightly. His face, a mask of pain, twisted into something resembling triumph. You've made a mistake." Helena's expression did not change. "Have I?" A beat of silence passed before the first explosion hit. The palace shook violently, the walls trembling as the distant roar of destruction ripped through the capital city. Somewhere outside, fire bloomed against the skyline, black smoke curling into the atmosphere. The soldiers wavered, their weapons still trained on her, but their attention divided. Then, her ship's AI spoke through her earpiece. "The bombs have detonated, General. Imperial fleet is scrambling. The capital is burning. Oh, and you're probably surrounded by angry people with guns, but I assume that was part of the plan." Helena exhaled through her nose, her fingers twitching slightly as she readied herself. She had known the Emperor would try to call for reinforcements. She had known the palace was not the only target that needed to be hit. So, while she had been storming the throne room, her people, what few she still trusted, had been planting explosives in key locations across the city. Government buildings, military outposts, fleet command centers. Now, the Empire's capital was burning. The soldiers surrounding her hesitated, waiting for orders. The Emperor, still struggling to process how quickly his entire world had collapsed, finally snapped out of his daze and shouted, "Kill her." Helena moved before they could. She lunged for her dropped rifle, rolling to the side as the first plasma bolts streaked through the space she had just occupied. The nearest soldier had barely a second to react before she drove the butt of her weapon into his face, the crack of breaking cartilage filling the air. The next two fell just as quickly, blue fire tearing through their armor as she fired from the hip. The remaining troops scrambled, some seeking cover, others unloading their weapons wildly in her direction. The throne room erupted into chaos. The Emperor attempted to crawl away, his hands slipping in his own blood as he made for the nearest exit. Helena saw him out of the corner of her eye, but did not move to finish him. Not yet. She took down another soldier, her movements swift, calculated. She had been out of the battlefield for years, but it had never truly left her. It was in her bones, in her breath. The soldiers were trained, but they were predictable. They fought in formations, followed protocol, adhered to doctrine. Helena had spent her life dismantling armies like theirs. And so she dismantled them now. By the time the last soldier fell, the throne room was a mess of shattered stone and bodies. Smoke curled from broken sconces, and the once polished floor was stained with blood and burn marks. Helena turned. The Emperor had made it halfway to a side door, his movements sluggish, desperate. She stepped toward him. He felt her presence before he saw her, his shoulders tensing as he forced himself to look up. His expression was not one of defiance, not anymore. It was that of a man who had finally come to terms with his fate. His voice was barely a whisper. I can still. She shot him through the head. The silence that followed was absolute. Helena exhaled, allowing herself a single moment of stillness. Then she reached for her earpiece. Status. Her AI's voice crackled in her ear. Empire's command structure is in freefall. Military fleets are turning on each other. Political leaders are either dead or trying to flee the system. Oh, and I believe the people are rioting. Should I send flowers? Helena allowed herself a small smile. No, she said. Let them burn. She stepped over the Emperor's lifeless body, her boots clicking against the blood-stained floor, and strode toward the doors. The Empire had made its mistake. Now it would pay the price. The galaxy did not understand what had just happened. One moment, the Galactic Empire stood as an unshakable monolith, a force that had endured centuries, stretching across thousands of systems with absolute control. The next, it was crumbling in real time. News of the Emperor's death spread like wildfire, a single pulse of chaos that tore through the interstellar networks faster than officials could contain it. A human had stormed the capital, executed the ruler in cold blood, and vanished into the void like a ghost. The Empire had faced wars before. It had crushed rebellions, extinguished uprisings before they could grow into legitimate threats. But this was different. This was personal. Helena sat in the pilot's seat of her ship, the Valkyrie, her fingers tightening around the controls as she watched the capital world shrink behind her. Fires still raged across the surface, entire city blocks reduced to smoldering wreckage. The people had not waited for further instruction. They had seen the palace fall, seen the imperial banners torn from their perches, and something primal had ignited in them. Revolt. Revolutions took time, coordination, leadership. But vengeance? That was immediate. Helena's crew, a patchwork band of the most dangerous, unpredictable humans the galaxy had ever produced, gathered around the ship's command deck, watching the destruction unfold through the viewport. Captain Riggs leaned back in his chair, tossing a combat knife between his fingers, his expression one of pure amusement. Reminds me of back home, he muttered. Dr. Emily Vargas, the crew's resident mad scientist and self-proclaimed expert in creative destruction, was busy typing furiously on a portable console, her glasses reflecting the flickering flames of the dying empire. The Imperial fleet is scrambling, but they're leaderless. Most of their admirals are either dead, defecting, or try to figure out if they still get paid next cycle. It's honestly pathetic. Big Dave, a towering brute of a man who somehow made even military-grade power armor look too small, crossed his arms over his chest and grunted. So what's next? That was the question, wasn't it? Helena closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the weight of everything settle in her chest. Her son was gone. The revenge she had sworn was complete. The Emperor was dead, his palace reduced to rubble, his government in freefall. And yet, even as she sat there, the remnants of her rage cooling into something quieter, she knew it wasn't over. The Galactic Empire was wounded, but wounds could heal. She had to make sure this one didn't. The answer came, not from her, but from the universe itself. The moment the Empire's collapse became public knowledge, something extraordinary happened. The vast, sprawling web of imperial rule, which had once functioned with machine-like efficiency, started unraveling thread by thread. Planetary governors, once bound by the Emperor's will, suddenly found themselves free agents. Some declared independence, raising their own banners in the vacuum left behind. Others panicked, trying to contact Imperial High Command, only to find silence in response. Military forces, no longer certain of their allegiance, fractured. Some officers swore loyalty to new warlords. Others fled, abandoning their posts. And then there were those who saw an opportunity. The Empire had made countless enemies. Oppressed species conquered civilizations, entire worlds that had suffered under its rule. And now, for the first time in history, they all smelled blood in the water. Helena's ship received its first message barely an hour after leaving the capital world. The screen flickered, revealing the image of an alien with crimson skin and 4 narrow eyes, each one burning with cautious hope. "This is Supreme Commander Vashlek of the Jundari Republic," the alien said. His voice carried the weight of years spent in battle, a leader who had long fought a losing war. "We've just received word that the Emperor is dead, that the Empire has no leadership. Tell me, human, is this true?" Helena tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Depends on what you plan to do with that information." Vashlek exhaled sharply. Behind him, figures moved, officers whispering frantically, analyzing data streams pouring in from every sector of the galaxy. The Jundari had spent decades resisting Imperial rule. They had fought tooth and claw, suffering devastating losses for every minor victory. But now they were staring at something they had never considered possible. "We want confirmation," he said finally. "If the Empire is truly without a ruler, then we intend to strike before it can recover." Helena leaned back, allowing herself a small, humorless smile. "Then I'd say you're in luck." That was the first message, the first crack in the dam. More followed. Rebel factions, exiled warlords, entire planetary governments desperate to seize the opportunity before it vanished. The Empire had ruled through fear, but fear only lasted as long as its enforcers could maintain it. And right now, those enforcers were dead, scattered, or scrambling to save themselves. The galaxy was waking up. Helena's crew worked without pause, coordinating with rebel forces, feeding them tactical data on Imperial fleet movements, directing them to the weakest points in the Empire's defenses. Dr. Vargas gleefully hijacked the Empire's communication networks, broadcasting footage of the Emperor's corpse across every major system. Captain Riggs relayed orders to strike teams, guiding them toward key installations. Big Dave? He just laughed. "Never thought I'd live to see the Empire get its ass kicked this bad." But for all the chaos, there was one undeniable truth. This war wasn't over. The Empire was vast. Even with its leadership decapitated, even with entire sectors breaking away, there were still admirals, governors, and die-hard loyalists who refused to accept defeat. Some saw the Emperor's death as a temporary setback, a moment of instability that could be corrected with the right amount of force. One such figure was Grand Admiral Zarquan. His fleet, the last truly cohesive Imperial armada, remained intact. Unlike the others who had hesitated, who had wavered in uncertainty, Zarquan had done what military minds did best. He had taken control. From the bridge of his flagship, the Vindicator, he watched the chaos unfold, his sharp, reptilian features betraying no emotion. His officers, once fractured in their loyalty, had fallen in line the moment he seized command. "The Empire is wounded, but it is not dead," Zarquan declared to his fleet. His voice carried across every Imperial vessel under his command, his words reinforced with the iron certainty of a man who had never known defeat. "We will restore order. We will crush the rebellion. We will remind the galaxy why it feared us." He turned his piercing gaze to his tactical display, where the Valkyrie's movements had been marked. "And we will start with her." Helena didn't need a warning to know he was coming. She had spent too many years on the battlefield to ignore the signs, the subtle shift in how the Empire's remaining forces moved. Zarquan was gathering his strength, consolidating what remained of the Empire's loyalists. He wasn't just trying to fight back, he was trying to rebuild. If she let him, The Empire would rise again. She stood at the command deck of the Valkyrie, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. Her reflection in the glass was sharp, the faint scars on her face catching the dim light of the control panels. "You know what we have to do," Captain Riggs said, stepping up beside her. She nodded. "We end this." Dr. Vargas grinned. "Oh, I like the sound of that." Big Dave cracked his knuckles. "Finally. Been too long since I had a good fight." Helena exhaled slowly. The Empire had taken everything from her. Now she would return the favor. Zarquan wanted to put the Empire back together. She would make sure there was nothing left to rebuild. Helena sat in the pilot's seat, her fingers hovering over the controls, her gaze steady. The enemy had come prepared. That was fine. She had too. Behind her, Captain Riggs loaded a fresh energy cell into his plasma rifle. His lips curled into a wolfish grin. "Hell of a last stand, huh?" Dr. Vargas barely looked up from her data console, typing furiously as she prepared to unleash a small army of cybernetic viruses upon the enemy's targeting systems. "Oh, please. If this was a last stand, we'd be the ones outnumbered." Big Dave let out a slow chuckle, cracking his knuckles. "I see a whole lot of ships out there," he mused. "Hope they brought enough body bags." Helena smirked. "They won't need them. There won't be anything left." Zarquan's face flickered onto the Valkyrie's holocom, his cold, reptilian eyes narrowing as he studied her through the transmission. "You should have run," he said, his voice measured, precise. "You could have disappeared into the void and lived. But you came back. Why?" Helena leaned forward, arms resting casually on the console. "Because you're still breathing," she said. "That's a problem." A flicker of something. Discomfort? Annoyance crossed Zarquan's face, but it was gone in an instant. "You are outnumbered, outgunned, and running on borrowed time," he said. "Your little rebellion ends here." Helena tilted her head. "Borrowed time," she mused. "Funny. I was just about to say the same thing to you." Then she cut the transmission and opened fire. The Valkyrie's cannons roared, sending spirals of blue plasma lancing toward the nearest Imperial warship. The impact rocked the enemy vessel, its shields flickering as the sudden assault caught them off guard. Within seconds, the battlefield erupted into chaos. Zarquan's fleet responded with ruthless efficiency, their ships maneuvering into attack patterns, their heavy artillery spitting streaks of burning red toward the lone human vessel. But Helena was already moving, her fingers dancing over the controls as the Valkyrie twisted through the oncoming fire, slipping between the gaps in their formations like a specter of vengeance. "This is a really dumb idea," Dr. Vargas muttered, her fingers flying across her console as she deployed the virus she had been perfecting. "Just throwing that out there." "I know," Helena replied. A ripple of distortion washed over the enemy fleet as the virus struck, infiltrating their systems with eerie precision. Imperial targeting arrays flickered, their screens filling with bursts of static, ship-to-ship communications, dissolving into a mess of garbled signals and unexpected 1980s Earth sitcom theme songs. "What is that noise?" Zarquan's voice came through, confused and irritated. Big Dave grinned. "That, my scaly friend, is the sound of your systems getting taken over by Full House reruns." Helena banked the Valkyrie hard, cutting between two capital ships just as their confused gunners accidentally fired on each other. One ship's shields collapsed under friendly fire, its hull splitting apart in a cascade of blue flames. Riggs whooped. "Oh, this is just embarrassing." But Zarquan wasn't done yet. Through sheer force of will, the Grand Admiral adapted. He barked rapid-fire commands, rerouting ships, ordering manual targeting adjustments. The Empire's elite fighters surged forward, smaller and faster than the lumbering warships, their weapons calibrated for pinpoint strikes. Helena saw it coming. She threw the Valkyrie into a brutal roll, sending the ship into a dizzying spiral that should have been impossible at those speeds. Enemy fire screamed past them, missing by inches. One fighter wasn't so lucky. It overcompensated, clipping the edge of an Imperial dreadnought's deflector field. The resulting explosion sent both ships spiraling, crashing into each other in a glorious burst of shrapnel. "You're making this too easy," Helena called into the comms, voice laced with amusement. Zarquan's response was pure venom. "I will see you burn, human." Helena arched a brow. Big words for a guy who just lost half his fleet. As if to punctuate her point, another of his warships erupted in a chain reaction of secondary detonations. And then she saw it, the Vindicator, Zarquan's flagship, repositioning itself at the rear of the battle. It hadn't engaged yet, and Helena knew why. He was waiting, calculating. Riggs noticed it too. He's playing it smart, letting the others die while he watches for an opening. Helena's fingers drummed against the console. Then let's give him one. She slammed the controls forward, sending the Valkyrie hurtling toward the Vindicator at breakneck speed. Zarquan's eyes widened in brief surprise before he steeled himself. His ship's main cannons, far larger and more devastating than anything on the battlefield, began to charge. Dr. Vargas piped up. "That thing is going to atomize us if we get any closer." Helena grinned. "Not if we make them hesitate." She activated her comms and broadcast on every frequency. "Attention, Imperial Fleet," she said, voice calm, deliberate. "You've seen what's happening. You've seen your ships fall. But here's what you don't know. Your admiral? He's not here to win. He's here to escape." Silence. She had their attention now. "He's been sitting in the back, waiting for an opening. Waiting for you to die first. He doesn't care about you. He's not here to save the Empire. He's here to run." The Imperial forces faltered. Doubt seeped into their ranks. And then, just to twist the knife, Helena added, "But hey, don't take my word for it. Ask him yourself." Dozens of panic transmissions flooded Zarquan's comms. His officers demanded answers. His soldiers questioned their orders. For the first time, cracks appeared in his meticulously controlled forces. And Helena struck. She pulled the Valkyrie into a sharp dive just as the Vindicator's main cannon fired, its blast cutting through empty space where she had been a fraction of a second earlier. The missed shot destabilized the ship's power grid, forcing an emergency reset of its shields. That was all the opening she needed. She fired. A single torpedo, small but carrying an absurdly dense payload of experimental human-made explosives, slammed into the Vindicator's exposed flank. The explosion was glorious. The Vindicator lurched violently, internal detonations ripping through its decks. Flames and bodies spilled from shattered hull sections as the once mighty flagship began to list, its engines flickering desperately. Zarquan's voice screamed through the comms. "No. No, no, no." The explosion finally reached the ship's core. The Vindicator erupted in a supernova of white-hot energy, tearing itself apart in a blinding cascade of destruction. The last, desperate remnants of the Imperial fleet saw their leader vanish in an instant. And then, predictably, they ran. The Empire was finished. Helena exhaled, watching the wreckage drift through space, the final remnants of a regime that had once believed itself eternal. Big Dave let out a low whistle. "Damn, that was beautiful." Dr. Vargas smirked. "And they said humans weren't a threat." Riggs chuckled, wiping a bit of blood off his cheek. "Guess they know better now." Helena leaned back in her seat, eyes still locked on the ruins of the Empire. She had come for vengeance. She had found something more. She had changed the galaxy. And for the first time in a long, long while, she let herself smile.